All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here with Drew Dinsick and Brad Spielberger of PFF, all NFL today. Brad, good to see you. Last time I saw you was very briefly coming out of Prime 47 in Indianapolis for about 17 seconds. And then before that, a bit more of an extended meet in Las Vegas. But I know this is very much your Super Bowl, so keen for your thoughts on everything free agency and just firstly, in a macro sense, what's your overall thought on just how teams are kind of using the cap increase?
Yeah, it's been interesting. It's been right in line with the conversations I had with both clubs and agents coming into it, which was those top of market guys, the 8-figure guys, are going to get even more now. And the rest of the market's maybe not as impacted as you would think. I do think there's been some mid-tier growth that, running back, linebacker, safety. I think it's more tied to the draft classes being perceived as very poor at those positions than anything else. But like the guard market to me is not that indicator. It's more these guys just hit the market at the right time, and guys that were asking for 15 post cap spike were asking for 17, and yada yada. So that's been the big thing, is the top of market players taking advantage of that jump.
Yep, that all makes total sense. It's been like a flurry of activity, but at the same time, like I'm having a really tough time putting my finger on, well, that moves the needle. For me, that really changes my opinion of this conference, this division, that team. And I think the reason is because if you're outside the quarterback position, your impact is marginal. And the only quarterback of note who has really moved to this point is, at least I guess this is a qualifier, but is Kirk Cousins, just because he was playing at a top 10 level before at age 35, he tore his Achilles. And now he's with the Atlanta Falcons in presumably the weakest division. Are you kind of on the same page that of any move so far, of an actual move, right? Not like Chris Jones staying in Kansas City, but like an actual move? Is there anything else that I'm missing that has like particularly significant implications so far?
I think it's spot on. I think it'd be kind of ill-advised to think differently, because the best players that will actually go elsewhere are going to be guys at non-premium positions. So yes, they're still impactful and meaningful. Christian Wilkins going to the Raiders, creates an awesome 1-2 punch with Max Crosby on the defensive line. They might have the best run defense in the NFL next year. Are you going to jump to the Vegas odds because their run defense went from, top 10 in the second half of last year to maybe being top 10 again, but who knows? Like that's kind of the issue. So I'm with you. The receiver market is pretty small. Calvin Ridley could be a meaningful move depending where he goes, but otherwise you're not going to get tackles that matter all that much. The edge rushers, like I like Jonathan Grenard. Minnesota is probably going to lose Daniel Hunter anyway, so it's kind of a 1-for-1 swap. So no, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think with Cousins as well, I think it gets a little bit neglected that he's going to enter the season 36 coming off an Achilles tear, which is about as bad an injury as you can have. So I think the idea that, he is going to be the guy who, he was on a trajectory where he was going to finish like 5th in MVP. Like he was playing at a really high level, and then obviously goes down. And I think the perception of Cousins was almost inflated as well by what the Vikings wheeled out at quarterback after he went down. But talking about some other quarterbacks, Russell Wilson obviously goes to the Steelers on that, effectively a bargain $1.2 million deal because it's offset by the Broncos. The Steelers are still a distant 4th in the AFC North. They're 11-1, double the price of the Browns, and naturally the Ravens and Bengals are heavy favorites. What do you think of Pittsburgh's ceiling now? Do you see them as a realistic contender in the AFC North?
Yeah. So look, I'm not going to sit here and say how Russell Wilson's just like, great quarterback still, but look, it's a market upgrade over Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph. Like I think it's unfair to say it's not. And I don't necessarily even love the combo with Arthur Smith and what they like to do, but I do like what it does for George Pickens. So we're talking about teams and division stuff like that. I'm sitting here thinking of draft for number one. We can get into that a little bit of like which teams draft which positions. But then also last year I was big on Cortland Sutton's season-long props when Russell Wilson got there. I said the main benefactor is the jump ball, go up and get it, big body contested catch receiver. And that was the case. So, it doesn't move the needle for me in the division, but they are a better football team now than they were last year. The defense should still be good. Patrick Queen deal is not a bad deal either. And they are still in on some offensive linemen. We'll see if they get some deals done there, but I think they are trying to make a move at center too, which would be helpful for Russell Wilson, no doubt.
Okay, let's stay on this for just a second. I'll ask you a couple prop questions, or just make a market for me here. Over under, or I guess who makes more starts between Russell Wilson and fellow division? Been a long time since we've seen you play well, Deshaun Watson, and who ultimately finishes with a higher EPA per play next season between Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson.
You know, the crazy thing is like they both take way too many sacks, but Russ almost never misses time, right? He had the one stretch in Seattle, he had the finger injury. I would still go to Sean though, because look, that offense, look, Jerry Jeudy obviously is not, what we thought he was going to be, but when he's now maybe your fourth weapon or third weapon, I guess Elijah Moore is also not what we thought he could be. But like I do like all of the tertiary options now in that pass catching core. They got to figure out the tackle situation, but I think they will if they get healthy. So I would lean to Deshaun Watson just because the offensive line in theory should be better. And I do like the 1-2 punch of Deontay Johnson and George Pickens. The Steelers have nothing beyond that at wide receiver, and it sounds like they're entertaining the idea of trading Deontay, although I think that is more leverage and extension negotiations because he's in the last year of his deal. But hey, maybe they do trade him, and then you have the mercurial George Pickens and pretty much nobody else.
Yeah, with Deshaun, I think still one of the strangest players to, I guess, project going forward, where like it wasn't that long ago that he was playing at a level of like the third best quarterback in the NFL and that type of range. Where he's obviously not Patrick Mahomes, but he was looking like he was going to be in that tier with Allen and Burrow and those types. And like he's still 28 years old. He's got the same MVP odds as Bryce Young and Will Levis. Like I think that there is still a fair bit of upside with Deshaun, though obviously we haven't seen it for a while. Last time we saw Deshaun, literally the last time on the field, he's going 14 for 14 in the second half against the Ravens defense while he had, a high ankle sprain and a fractured shoulder. Like I do think there is still something there with him. Speaking of reclamation projects in a way similar to Russell Wilson, the Vikings, they replaced Kirk Cousins with Sam Darnold, 1 year, $10 million deal, strange musical chairs of quarterbacks. They're not holding a great chair at the end, but it is a chair nonetheless in Sam Darnold. Now, I think the bullish case on Darnold would be that this is going to be the best context he has ever been in if we take out, the 2 quarters that he played at San Francisco. Do you think there was enough that he showed at the end of the previous season with Carolina to make you think that, he could still have some upside and the Vikings might still be a real threat for the division?
I do think he was quietly pretty good that last 6-game stretch or so in Carolina. And you mentioned, look, this is the best tackle tandem he's ever had by a mile. If they can get Brian O'Neill healthy, you have 2 good receivers. Obviously, got to get TJ Hawkinson healthy, but he should be back at some point. And then, the familiarity with Josh McCown, his former teammate, who's now the quarterback's coach in Minnesota. And obviously, Kevin O'Connell, I'm sure was a fan at some point as well. So, I still find it hard to believe in Sam Darnold and buy into the notion that there's just untapped potential that we're just missing with Sam Darnold. But I don't hate the idea of him as a bridge to, again, we talked draft props. I think my favorite thing about Kirk Cousins going to Atlanta in particular is Minnesota just gave a quarterback to the one team that I think was more likely to trade up in the draft than they are from 11, and now they're not. So I don't hate Darnold as a guy. If he starts 4 games at start of season, let's say not the full season, but he starts a month, maybe 2 months, I think he can go 500 in this context of this team, and then maybe the rookie comes in and is good early on. So that's more how I would view it.
Yeah, I personally think it's tough to parse how good Kirk Cousins looked last year from how good that supporting cast was, personally. So Sam Darnold, if you want to have a low risk, kind of high upside bet on a guy reclamation project, I think that's perfectly fine if you want to take Darnold on. The opposite end of the spectrum is the Miami Dolphins. They let 2 big bodies walk out of the room. Trenches are now a little deteriorated. They have a lot of kind of injury risk guys on defense. They have a new system to install with Vic Fangio leaving. And kind of the writing is on the wall that they are going to prepare to reset the quarterback market with Tua. Otherwise, I don't think you let Christian Wilkins and Hunt go, particularly considering that this guy seemed like locker room leaders from all of the clips I saw on HBO. So those were tough moves, and it feels like the Dolphins are a little bit of making our bet on Tua. And for better or worse, thoughts on what he could get compensation wise and how we will view this contract in, 2 years, 1 year, 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's going to get 50 plus. Does he reset the market entirely above Joe Burrow 55? Like, that'll be a different conversation. I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility. It works out very, very nicely. He is repped by the same agency that also reps Dak Prescott and Jordan Love. So you have the 3 biggest extensions of the offseason all controlled by one person who, and again, like agents can talk and can know what's going on with each other, but it's very easy when it's just you doing it yourself. So like, they can work through all those things. I think it will be, I don't know, if I had to guess, I actually would say he won't reset the market. It'll be close. Like it'll be Justin Herbert's contract, right? But I don't know if he jumps ahead of Joe Burrow. And the thing too that's crazy, people aren't talking about enough. All right, you lose Robert Hunt to I probably wouldn't pay him 5 years, 100, but they're starting center Connor Williams, not under contract. They're starting left guard Isaiah Wynn, not under contract. Yeah, they got Teron Armstead back, but what's that? That's going to get you 6-8 games a year at this point. Like great player, but has not been healthy forever. And they extended Austin Jackson, who's an average right tackle, maybe slightly below average right tackle. Like they have other issues to still address, even after losing 2 guys to 9-figure contracts.
Yeah, I think the sneakiest thing of the free agency period so far has just been that the Bills and the Dolphins have shed a ton of guys. And I still think those are probably your 2 best teams in the AFC East. But in terms of the AFC, which looked like it was going to be an absolute gauntlet and still may be, I think that this has been a good period for the Chiefs, the Bengals, who I think have sneakily done really well. Bringing in Geno Stone is big. And then, the Ravens will be thereabouts again. And the Bills and Dolphins will have some question marks. Brad, Justin Fields from your neck of the woods. What is going on there? Because Ian Rappaport from NFL Network kind of reported today that the Bears are kind of making up their mind on Caleb Williams, and that's holding up the Justin Fields process. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. Like, it's everything I've heard is done. Like, Caleb Williams is going to go number 1 to the Bears. So why is Fields still on the team, and what do you think ultimately happens?
Yeah, far be it from me to refute what Ian Rappaport is saying. It's not the perception I have of the situation. I'll put it that way. Look, I mean, I think what happened is ultimately there's a game of musical chairs at quarterback, and between both the veterans, so not just your Kirk Cousins but Baker fills a hole. Gardner Minshew, at least from a bridge standpoint, fills a hole. Like a lot of just these jobs, I think even backup jobs now. I mean, the Giants and the Jets get Tyrod and Drew Lock. Like all these scenarios where Pittsburgh with Russell Wilson. Again, I don't think he's outright lying, and I don't think maybe they're shopping Justin Fields, but yes, they would like to trade Justin Fields. You don't have Ryan Poles saying, I want to do right by him during Combine. Like, what else would that mean? Besides, we're trying to get him to a good situation, a good landing spot where he can compete to be a starter in this league. The issue is there just aren't that many jobs available. So I'm taking my shot based on zero intel. I think he's going to be the Seattle Seahawks backup quarterback, but I think it's going to take a little bit of time to get there. And it's not going to be a very exciting return from a trade compensation standpoint.
Okay, there you go. All right, well, this week, the best on the PGA Tour take on TPC Sawgrass for the 50th time for the Players' Championship. Don't miss the best golfers in the world Thursday through Sunday on NBC, Golf Channel, and all-round streaming on Peacock. Comcast Business is a proud partner of the Players' Championship in addition to Optum and Morgan Stanley. All right, Brad, let's hit a few NFC teams specifically, the Packers, Lions, and Eagles. Let's start with the Packers, who are second favorites to win the NFC North. The Lions plus 140, Packers plus 210. The Vikings are at the plus 650, and the distant fourth favorite in that division. The Packers have made some quite sneakily good additions. Xavier McKinney coming in at safety. Josh Jacobs, not such a quiet addition. But what do you think of this team's outlook at the moment, and do you think that they justify being the second favorite to win the division?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they may have had, of any position room for any team in the entire NFL, the Packers safety room may have been the worst position room in the NFL last year. Like, they just ignored the spot entirely. And again, of all positions to ignore, you probably could argue safety is not a bad choice, but McKinney was the best safety available. He's a stud. He was awesome this past year in New York, and they had no pass rush, nothing in front of him that could maybe boost his numbers or make him look better. Probably why Geno Stone didn't sign a super strong contract. I'm a fan of his, but everything in front of him was fantastic, right? So I think McKinney was a great signing. Obviously you can quibble with spending top of market on a running back. They almost traded for Jonathan Taylor at the deadline. So at least they didn't give up draft capital. They have an extra second round pick from the Jets, which will be a nice pick, top 40 pick or in that range, right? So yeah, I mean, the Lions should be favored. I think it's fair. They've also, I think, had a good offseason. Carlton Davis trade is a smart move. Amik Robertson, good depth there as well. I'm hearing they're in on some defensive linemen, which would be smart. But yeah, the Packers, I think this is a fair market where it is right now.
Yeah, Packers are a decent buy low in the NFC, in my opinion. The reps that those young guys got in playoffs last year are going to matter. And, they changed the defensive system. That was something that we have been banging on the table for 2 years ongoing, and adding a little bit of a injection of talent at I like your point. The context around McKinney mattered. The context around Josh Jacobs mattered. He was in a bad situation with Josh McDaniels, and he was kind of lightly used last year. So potentially a little less wear on the tires is an interesting setup. All that said, I think the top of the division right now with the Lions also seeming to push their chips in a bit, in terms of kind of going and addressing what were clear and obvious needs on that roster. I guess, do you think the Lions are done addressing holes? And, do you think they have done enough to close the gap with the likes of the San Franciscos at the top of the NFC?
So I don't think they're done. I heard some interior defender names that are getting, kind of talked about. And then I could see edge rusher for them as well. Just a pass rusher, I think, just needs to happen. And I think it will. I like they didn't re-sign Jonah Jackson. I mean, 3 years, $51 million. He was the guy that I least understood the buzz about when I did my free agency project. He's a fine player. I just don't see why he is now like a top 5 paid guard in the NFL. So they keep Graham Glasgow. They do need another guard to get in the fold. But no, I don't think they're done. I think defensive line, you should keep your eye on.
We got a name. Danielle Hunter is going to Texans, right?
That's my expectation. We'll see if that happens. I heard that the whole way through. I heard San Fran for him. They've now signed a bunch of defensive linemen. I would keep an eye on in Detroit, like some good interior players, like potentially a Sheldon Rankins, a DJ Reader, those types. I haven't heard any names on edge rusher, but I'm sure they're in those conversations as well.
Yeah. By the way, with the Lions, who signed Marcus Davenport. Marcus Davenport's only 27 years old. It feels like he's like 60. Like Marcus Davenport feels like he's been around forever. But I know he's dealing with injuries in Minnesota. But previous to that, I mean, his PFF grades have always been amazing. With the Rams and Jonah Jackson, they do, like, for a team that is ostensibly very well run and had, I think, relative to expectations, one of the best seasons of anyone. They do some weird stuff between offering $1 million first for Brian Burns a year ago and then Jonah Jackson's contract. Like, there is some strangeness, but I'm with you on the Lions. I think that, and look, we'll talk about lots of season-specific bets, but there are some ones with the Lions that I like that we can get to at another time. But that defense, just with the fact that there are guys like Melifonu and Brian Branch and Jack Campbell who will get better. They bring in Carlton Davis, bring in Davenport. Like, that defense could actually, at times it was an absolute mess, and now it looks like it's going to be respectable, and they bring back 80% of one of the best offensive lines in football. Again, they're going to play in a lot of dome games to protect Mr. Goff. So I think that they are going to be a force next year, and they warrant being the favorite for their division. The Philadelphia Eagles were the favorite for their division. They're almost the entire season before magnificently blowing it at the death. They are now a slight dog to the Cowboys, who haven't done anything yet in free agency. Were you surprised, Brad, by the Saquon contract and the fact that the Eagles invested that much at the position?
I will say, I got a shout out, I guess Albert Breer made a good point. I think it's because they get rumored on every single top running back. I think they're more don't use an early draft pick on a running back, even though they did use a second on Miles Sanders. But, when there was like Bijan buzz, it was like Howie Roseman's not using a top 10 pick on Bijan. But Breer's point was they also signed DeMarco Murray in free agency in 2015. LaShawn McCoy obviously had a big deal, and that is, a different NFL than today. But anyway, I was kind of surprised by it. For me, the angle I would push if I'm them, and I'm not trying to make the he's a gadget, he's a weapon thing, but they don't have much receiving behind their top two guys. Obviously, Goddard's a good player, but I want to see Saquon in the slot and doing different things as a pass catcher, because it's really right now at a receiving standpoint, it's just Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, and question marks.
Is there a case to be made that behind the, I know Kelsey's moved on, but that's still an elite offensive line. It's pretty clear. Have we ever seen Saquon behind an elite offensive line in his entire career?
Have we seen him behind a good offensive line? Forget it.
Good. Yeah, it's tough to say. No, it's an interesting experiment, but the defensive side of the ball for the Eagles intrigues me more. You bring Vic Fangio in, and they're going through an entire, restaffing, reshuffling. what's the vision here? Why are they teasing trade options for some of their elite pass rushers? How are they really counting on, some of the draft choices they made from that Georgia team to step into the roles vacated by some of these guys who are walking out the door? Do they have any answers at secondary? Is this going to be some of the landing spots for some of the more elite secondary guys who are floating out there? What do you expect on the defensive side for Philadelphia?
For the 2 edge rushers, I actually get the Reddick one. He's going to a contract year, probably wants a great big deal, and he's going to be 30, I think, in the near future. And he's kind of a Nolan Smith type, right? He's undersized, speed rusher. The Josh Sweat one, I don't really understand. He also is going to a contract year. I get that. But he's like 26, 27 years old, I want to say right now, and has dramatically outperformed the 3-year, $40 million extension he already signed. So obviously, once you add in Bryce Huff, you give yourself optionality. And I think Howie's perspective is, I'll get draft capital and I already replaced this guy. Because I think, you're not getting a first round pick for either of those guys, but maybe a 4, maybe a late 3 for Reddick. And I think you get a 2 or a 3 potentially for a Josh Sweat. So, yeah, and there might be some injuries there. Who knows, the greater context. But I'm with you where I still need to see more in the secondary for them. They don't spend on linebacker. They outright refuse. And I don't know if that changes this year, but it's safety. They apparently were in the McKinney sweepstakes, and I think there are still some good names there that I think could be a good fit.
Yeah, that makes sense. The Eagles' defense has always had talent, and they showed that talent when they made the Super Bowl. I'm starting to not think that the Cowboys should be the favorite in that division, just with the losses that they've had on the offensive line, with the fact that Dak. I don't think Dak can really play better than he did last season, and I think that Hurts can probably play better than he did, certainly at the back end of the season. And with Saquon, it'll be interesting because, as I think there is the idea that, Saquon athletically is back to the guy that he was earlier in his career, where, particularly the year 2022 when the Giants make the playoffs and Saquon is for much of the season the favorite to win comeback player of the year. And it felt like he was back. I don't think that he is back to the guy that he was in his rookie season. I don't think he has that explosiveness, and I'm not sure that he's going to recover that. I think when you look at his PFF grade, certainly he has not been that level of player. Just looking now, in his rookie season, Saquon was the number 3 running back in all of football by PFF grade. 2023, he was 35th. And even 2022, when the idea, I think, was that he was, back to being a top 5 running back, he was 15th. So it'll be interesting to see just the context of, is he going to be running through those comically large holes that DeAndre Swift was running through against Minnesota back in week 2 or whenever that game was? Or does Kelsey going mean that it's not quite as dominant of a lineup? But yeah, he's one of the more compelling players to watch. All right, spring training is here, Brad. So for those looking to get ahead on the upcoming MLB season, grab your Roto-World Baseball Draft Guide. It's loaded with comprehensive positional rankings, projections, and player profiles to ensure your draft is a success. Visit NBCSports.com/draft guide and use code BASEBALL24 to get 10% off at checkout. All right, before we get out of here, a few rapid fire questions. Just running back market in general, Brad, do you think there's been kind of a correction particularly after last year where it felt like, no one got what they wanted, and now we're seeing these contracts for the likes of Saquon? Do you think that they're now running back do you think it went too far in one direction and there's been a bit of a correction with running back value now?
I think that is part of it, where I think teams are now sitting there and saying, okay, we've reached the inflection point, or maybe now there's a value to a degree on these markets. I mean, I say this point all the time, but Adrian Peterson and Chris Johnson signed $14 million per year deals in 2011 and 2012. So Saquon Barkley got less than that 15 years later, right? So there is going to come a time, and I know the results and the outcomes of these veteran deals at running back are almost never good, but I think we got the Dave Montgomery, the James Conner, those type of markets started working out a little bit. And so we got more of those. But then second for me, we're talking betting. There's not going to be a running back in the first round. There might not be a running back in the top 50 draft picks of this year's draft.
Hey, Kyron Williams might be the 3rd best running back in the NFL, and he was a 5th rounder. So let's not entirely look past the late day 3 guys. And to that point, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, man. I thought the Eagles was this super smart organization. I thought the Ravens were the super smart organization. They're gaming the system. They're catching all these small little edges here and there. I will be flat out honest. I don't get the fit with Barkley. He's a boomer bust guy. Like, I feel like they would be teasing the margins where they're like, hey, we'll take a guy that's like consistently giving us 3.3 because we know we have 4 downs to work with. And similarly with the Ravens getting Derrick Henry, like, oh, what a great fit. Like, he's Ravens culture through and through. Like, the perfect fit. Blah, blah, blah. Keaton Mitchell looked unbelievable last year when that guy was healthy. Maybe they don't expect him to ever be healthy again. That's why they need this gap. But, if you can evaluate and get day 2, 3 guys to, give you that kind of production and that kind of explosiveness, like Jay said, like what the Bengals are doing. Like the Bengals went and found a diamond in the rough who could instantly take on the role that Mixon is vacating there. And I think that was brilliant. And hopefully that helps them kind of figure out a way to make a deal with T. Higgins. But the running back stuff feels like I feel like I'm tripping here. And I just can't understand, where the league is going. Do you think the moving off of Mixon, kind of doing some of the kind of margin stuff around the edges the Bengals are doing, is that going to allow them to retain Higgins long term, or do you think this is a 1-year type of uncomfortable marriage, and or do they find a trade?
I think it's probably the uncomfortable marriage most likely. I do like the move. I agree, because Zach Moss is a good early down player, and Chase Brown, it was late season, but is a fun pass catching back that I think had some juice. It was the Jaguars game. I think he was killing the Jaguars in that game. So the Higgins thing to me is just, look, you place the tag immediately. Now it comes to the reports there were no conversations prior to the tag, and I want to underscore how rare that is. We're like, you always try to have a back and forth in the contract, and then you get to the end of the tag window, then you place the tag. And we've actually already seen, too, Chicago with Jalen Johnson, Pittman in the Colts, Matabike in the Ravens. Like, we've already gotten a bunch of extensions off those tags as well. So I think it's classic Bengals. They don't have any phone calls. They don't take any offers. They just make him play for a year. They go the Jesse Bates route, and then he's just on a different team, next season.
Bengals are funny. I love bringing up the PFF kind of lineup page where you see everyone on the one spot. And the Bengals, it just never looks great because the offensive line is never good. There's just kind of a lot of shades of yellow and orange and faint green. But then there's Burrow and Chase, and there's usually, there's Trey Hendrickson, obviously. But they do seem to make it work. Drew, to your point about running backs, I wonder how much, and this isn't a particularly original thought, lots of people have brought this up, but just how much Shanahan paying so much for McCaffrey and how well that has worked out, in perception at least, and the idea that McCaffrey has made things so much easier for Brock Purdy. And for as much as the idea that like running backs don't matter, like Christian McCaffrey matters a fair bit, and he moves the line largely because of what he can do as a receiver in conjunction with what he can do as a rusher. And I think that guys like Saquon, in theory, can replicate that. And maybe there's the thought that, we need to not put so much on Jalen Hurts' shoulders that, he needs that type of weapon. It's just the question of, I don't think Saquon Barkley is Christian McCaffrey at this point. Brad, in terms of contenders, do you think there is one in either conference that is most in need of doing something in free agency?
Yeah, you might not put them in the contender bucket, but I guess I'll go ahead and throw them in there. You shouldn't always make splashes in free agency, but if I'm Houston and I saw what I did last year with a rookie contract, CJ Stroud and Nico Collins and Tank Dell, Will Anderson, all those players, and I do like what they've done. The Nico Autry, awesome player. Like, go get Danielle Hunter. Like, go make a bigger splash that maybe in some years you would never consider. But right now, you're just like, we're so cheap at a bunch of premium positions with rookie deals. Let's push our chips in a little bit. So, again, you may not have seen the Houston Texans a contender coming, but they could be.
I think they're here, man. Here's this kind of final question for you. The biggest mess in football right now is the Carolina Panthers. The entire what would have happened in last year's draft if the Bears trade Fields last year, and then they take, CJ Stroud first, right? Or it ended up like all of this butterfly effect happened from that trade and going forward. Like, how do you fix the Panthers?
Sheesh. Yeah, I mean, I guess in their mind, you spend, like 150 mil on guards. I actually do like both players. Like Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis are good. And I guess the thinking is, keep little Bryce behind a stout interior offensive line. You just still need way more pass catching options. And I will say, if there's a team that could maybe convince the Bengals to trade T. Higgins, the Panthers now have the 33rd and 39th overall pick in this year's draft. They don't have a second next year. It's also going to Chicago. But as much as you probably don't want to move draft capital for a veteran player, like maybe you do if it's a receiver that can totally change, the dynamic of your offense. But no, yeah, they're so far away. Their defense. Go look at you're talking about the PFF pages. Go pull up their defense. How many guys have you even heard of?
Yeah.
They look like the number one fewest wins with a bullet right now, and that's even if they make a couple of good draft choices and a couple moves left, like it's not good.
Yeah. Dave Canales has been kind of a hot name for coach of the year. And, it's an easy case in theory that he fixes Bryce Young after he fixed Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. But the problem is he's going to have to win games to win coach of the year. And that is that might be the struggle. 3 things for you, Brad, before we get out of here. One, just need to reiterate that Brad Spielberger has one of the greatest kind of disparities between height that you think and then actual height in reality. I would have set the over-under at 6'1.5", but Brad's like 7'2". He's like Wembanyama. It's unbelievable. Every time I see Brad in person, it's ridiculous. Secondly, I know you're a Bulls man. I need you to get Kobe White most improved player home for me. I have a lot of money on that, so please will that into existence. And then third, can you tell everyone where to follow you and what you're working on aside from everything?
Yeah, Kobe White is well deserved. I'll spread that around. Get the buzz going there. So yeah, follow me on Twitter at PFF_Brad, and of course everything at PFF.com or contract stuff at overthecap.com. Appreciate you guys a ton. I will be doing a bunch on gambling and draft gambling once we have a better picture of free agency, because I think it is a pretty big signal on what teams are thinking.
Okay, love it. Thanks very much for your time, Brad. We'll speak to you soon.
Thank you, guys.
All right, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. Thanks to those watching on the NBC Sports YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. And a reminder that you can find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher, Drew Dinsick. Thanks again to Brad Spielberger for joining us today. We'll see you soon.